Hello, Devlin here with you, and welcome to another edition of Devlin's Pirate Radio Show. I'm here with you, and thank you for joining me and hitting play and taking some time out of your busy day to spend it with me. And I've got a interesting show. I'd like to think. I have to say that because I don't know. What I think is interesting may not be interesting to other people, but some people tune in week after week, so I assume I'm saying something they want to hear. And hey, if not, people like to argue nowadays, so, maybe sometimes we don't always have to agree, and it still makes for good entertainment. I've talked about lots of different kinds of addictions over the years, alcohol, drugs, gambling. I may not have done full segments on them, but addiction is everywhere you go. You can be addicted to almost anything. You can be addicted to substance, or you can be addicted to, a TV show that you enjoy and you can't get enough of it. But I'm going to talk about an addiction that a lot of people don't actually consider an addiction, but I think it's just as easy to fall into its realm than anything. And it's called loneliness. And maybe that's not the term I'm looking for, but I do believe that people can be addicted to just hiding away from the world, not wanting to get social with people. They'd rather be on their own than go out. And I don't think this is a subject that's talked about a lot. And the reason why is because I think they think it's okay if you want to stay on your own. And absolutely, I've talked before about how, to me, I consider it very important to have time on your own and just spend it with your thoughts. But when it consistently sabotages relationships in your life, or your mind playing games with you, telling you how much you like this, but eventually you just become addicted to it. I see this a lot on Facebook. A lot of people, constantly say, well, I'm very antisocial, not all depression is, it makes you antisocial. It makes you not want to be in social. And I get that. But a lot of times it's just, I see it a lot more in the winter, because in the winter, I'm the first one who can say this. I can literally talk myself out of almost anything. You go to work. You have to go to work, you have to make your money, but when you come home, you're like, okay, I could go and call a friend up and hang out with them. Or I could just stay in and do some things around the house, maybe watch some TV, go on the computer. And I'm the first one who can talk myself out of it. I could get invites to things and think, well, I could do that, but I think I'm just going to stay in. And this becomes, it gets easier every time you do it. And it's not healthy. I don't think there's anything wrong with spending quality time with yourself, or even unquality time with yourself. But I think it's important for you to go out and socialize, hang with a friend, have a friend over. I think it's important in all aspects, whether you're single or you're married. A lot of married people get into this rut too, especially when they have kids and they use the kids as an excuse to stay home. And to me, yeah, it's great that you want to spend time with your kids and stuff, but as the kids grow up and notice that you're not going out, and it really kind of shows them that you really don't have a social life and need a social life, and then when you notice your kids aren't really knowing how to make friends, well, it's not a priority in your life, so why would it be a priority in your kids' life? And, I've talked to many, I've hung out with many married men that suddenly they just, once they get married and have kids, that's it. They just stay at home, watch the TV, probably go on the computer, stuff like that, and talk themselves out of almost any social activity that they can. And they use their, partners or their their kids. And I said married men, but I've had some married women that do the same thing. And again, I think it's important. Like, I think it's great to have your own social time. I think that's important. I think a lot of people have the reverse. They basically go out and say yes to everything they do, and then they wonder why they have no time for themselves. So I'm all for making time. But when it gets to the point where it becomes obsessive, now here's some things you don't think about, okay? If you're doing this as a single now, as you get older, it gets harder to make friends. You know, when we're younger, we go out places that there are people our own ages. But when we get older and we start, I don't care if you blame it on social anxiety, depression, whatever you need. You don't just sit back and not do it. You know what I mean? It's important for you to go out. I think it's even more important for you to go out and try it. My problem when people get diagnosed with depression or anxiety or anything is that they just use that as an excuse. And yeah, there's times when you have no choice, but you have to stay in. You can't deal with the world. I get that. But there are many days that you should be out doing something social, whether it's even just meeting a friend for a coffee or just hanging out. You don't even have to talk. You can put on a movie, but you're sharing it with someone at least. So if you're a single person doing this, what happens is when you get caught up in a rut and you stay home playing your video games or whatever you're doing, it gets harder and harder to make friends. And I'm sure a lot of my older friends will agree it's not easy. A lot of the friends we have, if you look back, are friends that we had growing up, and they haven't changed. And what makes it even harder is that if you're not one of the ones being social, your friends are probably moving on with their lives, with their own marriages and kids, and going out and doing their own social stuff, which means that you become isolated from them too. Now, for married couples, I have some wonderful married couples that, are constantly going out with the kids and doing stuff. And they even have like dates for themselves, and they have social days for themselves too, as in one day the mother will take care of the kids and the father will go out and hang out with friends or go to, an activity. And then another night, he'll stay in and the mother will go out and get a girls' night out or, go do some of her hobbies. And I think this is a nice blend because not only are you spending time with your kids, you're spending time with your spouse, but you're also keeping those relationships alive. And it's not just about the relationships. Your kids start noticing that you have no friends. What are they going to think? How are they going to learn? A lot of kids learn from example, and if you're not showing that example, then how are they seeing it? How are they seeing how to be around other kids their own age? Now, for married people who are using the constant, work's crazy, then I come home, spend time with the kids, spend time with the wife. Yeah, I get it. It's busy, and that's great that you do all that. But you still need time for yourself. And time for yourself, sure, can be anything from watching sports to touching self inappropriately, looking at the computer. But you need days to go out and hang out with a friend, away from the house, go to a movie, go to a sporting event, go to a music event. And that goes for men and women. But again, loneliness is addictive. And once you start getting into that rut, you start just enjoying my quiet life. But here's the thing we don't think about. Once the kids hit about 14, 15, 16, that's when they're going to start getting really affected by friends. And they're going to not want to spend as much time with you. Because most kids, and I hate to say it, but you kind of want this in some ways. Most teens hit a certain age where they suddenly get a social life, and suddenly the parents aren't the most important people in the world anymore. Usually they come back around when they get older and realize how important parents are, if you're lucky. Now, you want this because if your friends are, if you've got a great relationship with your kids, I think it's great through teen years. But if they're not rebelling against you a little bit, that means that you've kind of forced them to not go out and take chances and risks. And, I'm not questioning your parentage, but you are smothering them a bit because they need to have a little bit of that. And of course, if they don't see you doing that. So anyhow, as you get older, you can rely on saying, oh, I'm going to stay home with the kids. But eventually the kids won't want anything to do with you. And then you don't have that. What if you continue and you're happy with going home, hanging with your relationship and partner? There's nothing wrong with that. I'm certainly not saying. I love spending time with Mike. And if I have weeks that are too busy, I cancel a couple things because I'm like, no, I want to spend time with Mike. That's just as important as going out and still keeping relationships going. But the problem here is you don't think about the long term. And one of those days, one of you are going to die or get sick. And then suddenly your loneliness about, two people cuddling on the couch goes to one person who is stuck in the house and basically just dying of loneliness. So I get how you can get addicted to loneliness and how it can be appealing even. Because like anything, any addiction from alcohol to gambling, it starts off, like I'm in control, and then you get to a rhythm where you just don't even think it's an addiction anymore. And loneliness is the same thing. You can kick up your feet after work and kick your shoes off, but then one day you realize, I have nobody in my life. All the people that I once cared about, I pushed away because I was so content in my lonely lifestyle. And even if you got to remember, even if your life isn't lonely when you stay home, that's fine. There is nothing wrong with that. But you will sense it at times. And if you don't, well, then you're probably a person who is okay just being alone. But as humans, that's not really where we're supposed to be, I don't want to be singing the Breeder's Handbook here, but since they always drill us in the head that our whole business of being on Earth is to create and to procreate and breed and have kids and have things, it really kind of, to me, it defeats the purpose if you were born and you're just not reaching out to people. You show up and yes, and I get it. I do too. In the winter, I can talk myself out of anything. Sometimes in the summer too. And for the last couple of years, I really pick and choose what I do. And I see how beautiful it would be to just come home every night and just not be around people. But those days that I do socialize and I reach out, I remember how much I laugh and I have a good time. And it feels good to, share somebody's conversation, somebody's glare, somebody's stare, somebody's hug. It all feels good. I think, and then sometimes we also get pets. And I love pets, but I think we've relied too heavily on pets. I think they are good companionship. But I think we've almost turned them into our personal slaves. I said this to somebody once, and they thought about it and said, now that I think about it, it is a little sad when you put it that way. Well, think about it. It's like you get a pet, and you put your whole companionships and needs on them, okay? Dogs, they need the companionship and stuff, but, they kind of probably need companionship from other dogs. But no, because we're lonely and because the world has hurt us a bit, we totally put our relationships in our animals, and I just don't think that's necessarily fair to them. They basically have to do everything for us, and it to me it seems a little bit like slavery, and it shouldn't be that way. Your pet should be your pet. Your pet shouldn't be your... Now, don't get me wrong, I think pets are definitely big parts of the family. I think they're definitely, but I've seen people that use their pets like they're their children. Their pets are like their, significant other, and I think pets should be allowed to be pets sometimes. And a pet is very much a part of the family, but when you're putting human qualities onto them because humans have broken your heart, well, guess what? The only time animals will probably break your heart is when they die. And that's not because we constantly talk about how they're all about love. They're all about love. It's like, yeah, they are in some ways. But that would be like the equivalent of having a mannequin around the house and saying this mannequin loves me unconditionally, you know. It's just, pets should be our companions, our friends and stuff, but they shouldn't be replacing human contact. And you know, when you see, like, you know, I don't want to put stereotypes out there, but you know, cat ladies with multiple cats and stuff, they put all their emphasis on love. And then when, you know, a lot of times they're like, oh, I was hurt by people many times. Well, people are going to hurt you because of the fact that their relationships we actually have to work on. They're not just forced into our life and you better love me. You better love me, is which we would do with pets a lot of times. We do that with partners sometimes too. Throw in the whole thing about how, you know, you should be. But loneliness is addictive, and we have to break out of that addiction. We need to step out once in a while and be social. Yes, I know it can be scary, and it's more comfortable to come right home and put your pajamas on and then just forget the rest of the night. But you know what? We're losing senses of ourselves. Now, I am not a psychiatrist anyway, but I know I go through terms where I just spend so much time at home. And I get a little antsy. And Mike is the first one who says, maybe you should head out somewhere, call a friend, go to a movie, go do some improv. He's the first one to call me on it when I start getting edgy. But I see sometimes how easy it is to lose myself. And usually the first people that call me out are other people who are supposedly lonely. You know, and they're the first ones who say, well, you should get out. You know, it's important to get out. And then I'm like, but you're not. You're not. And getting out means, you know, just not only just being social with friends, but just being out and about. You know, that's where you see where life is. And yes, people are complicated. I wish I could say they were easy as pets and house plants, but they're not. They're complicated. And, you know, we have to deal with them. But you know what? The more you put yourself out there, the more you start meeting people that you can. And one thing that I've had a hard time dealing with is knowing that some friends are not here to stay. Some friends are just moments in your life, but they can be wonderful, wonderful moments. And then other friends stick around for a long time. So now with the weather getting nicer and stuff, I urge you to make little dates. They don't have to be big. You can meet for an hour at a coffee shop just to talk. You can invite someone over just to talk. But, yeah, you can't be afraid of not reaching out because we have to. That's human contact. That's part of what humans are about. I know it's scary. I know it's scary. And if you have anxieties or depressions, it's even more scary. But you have got to do it for yourself. You've got to do it for your children to see examples of it. You got to do it for your grandchildren. I know I used to love, you know, seeing grandparents that go out with their friends still and hang out and so full of life. Kids learn from that. They don't learn from, you know, grandma or grandpa sitting around watching their stories, you know, being locked up in a stuffy old house and stuff. The farthest they go is in their backyard. They can learn some things from it, but in the end, they'll say, why were they so lonely? They were really nice people. Anyhow, I can't force you to make the decision, but I urge you to at least take baby steps out that front door now that the nice weather's coming. You know, just do it. I think it is so important because loneliness is one of the worst addictions we can get into, and it's one of the easiest we can fall into. Anyhow, I'm going to take a short break, and then I'm going to go and talk about a little show that I watched growing up, and I still like to pop in an episode. And, yeah, I'll be talking a little bit about that Stone-Aged family when we come back. Welcome back, and I'm at my Mondo Nostalgia segment. I like to talk about old shows or music or movies. And I get a sneaking suspicion I may have talked about the Flintstones before, and I'm probably going to repeat a lot of stuff, but I don't know. I guess I do this show so much that you start forgetting, and I'm too lazy to go back and see, but they're on my mind, so I'm going to take a look at the Stone Age family. A very important show in history. The Flintstones. Uh, a lot of us remember seeing them around my age group on TV at in the morning or at lunch. But actually, the Flintstones were a show similar to The Simpsons and Family Guy. It was an actual first adult animated show, and although certainly not as risky or risque as Family Guy or Simpsons or South Park, the Flintstones still had more mature topics and at the time, and I still think is a groundbreaking show in a lot of ways. The early Flintstones were actually considered quite edgy. There was a lot of banter and insults between the adult characters, Fred, Wilma, Barney, and Betty. And a lot of it was taken from the Honeymooners, almost, I'm not saying word for word, but the Flintstones seem to be kind of a tribute and a salute to the Honeymooners. The show was rumored to have lost its edge a bit when they introduced Pebbles, where the show became more of a hearted family show. And then later added Bam Bam, and the show really became more family oriented to more sitcoms in the Brady Bunch kind of vein. But keep in mind, the Flintstones was pre a lot of these family shows, like the Brady Bunch or the Partridge Family, or even Family Ties and stuff like that. So the Flintstones was an early version of those. Now I mostly remember the Flintstones being on at noon. I used to go to school, and because I lived across the street from my school, I used to come home for lunch, and my mother would always make me French toast, and I would watch the Flintstones on Channel 13, where they would always put episodes, and I loved watching them. Sometimes friends would come over from school too, and they'd get some lunch from my mom, and we'd watch the Flintstones. And it's funny how many people I meet when I mention the Flintstones, and they say, "Oh yeah, 13, Channel 13," you know, noon, and you knew it was time to go to school when Agri News came on. The Flintstones, I think, was kind of a fun show. A lot of the humor in the beginning was not only just arguments, but a lot was the inventions using animals. And it kind of makes me laugh now when I think about it, because in the last segment about loneliness, I talked about how animals in some ways we treat like slaves. Well, better than slaves. But in some ways they do, and the Flintstones basically, they used a lot of animals as their slaves, so I'm kind of having a chuckle now, because I didn't plan that when I started talking about the Flintstones. Um, yeah, it was a fun show. It had some incredible characters. They had some hit and miss episodes like any show. I actually kind of liked when the show softened a bit and Pebbles and Bam Bam were offered, because of the fact that I did think the show found a lot more of its heart, because the Flintstones do have a lot of heart, and that's a big part of the show. It's not only funny, but there's a real heart to it. Heart as in Fred and William may fight, but you can tell that they love one another. And Fred and Barney fight, but you can tell that there's a real companionship, love between them. And so, yeah, there's heart all over, even when Wilma and Betty jump in the car and yell, charge it. Their friendship is like almost unbreakable, even though there are many episodes where one little thing would happen and they would break up so quickly and have to work really hard to get back together. The Flintstones was a big hit show, you could tell, because they had a lot of guest stars showing up at time. And Margaret, came on as Anne Margrock, and they even had like the cast of like Bewitched on and stuff. So they actually went through phases where, like most shows, like a Will and Grace or a Batman, where they just kind of had a lot of people come in and want to be on the show. But they were good. They did a lot of parodies of people, but it didn't necessarily be voiced by the actual actor. So, they dealt with pop culture, but they did it, like more almost like a South Park, where they didn't invite the people and they just did it. This is our parody, Stoney Curtis, or our version of the Beatles and stuff like that. And that was a good thing. Another reason you knew the Flintstones was an adult show is if you ever see on YouTube, you can check out Flintstones doing cigarette ads. Their sponsor was Winston Cigarettes for the longest time, and they would present the show, and the commercials would have Fred and Barney smoking cigarettes, and sometimes Wilma and Betty would join in. It's amazing that eventually the show was deemed, not so racy when they would put it on in the mornings and stuff, and that's when the Flintstones, I think, really took off. They were really popular in the evening, but then it became a kids show. Suddenly the Flintstones are everywhere. I think up to this point, even today, young kids know who the Flintstones are. I think kids who have never seen the Flintstones know who the Flintstones are. They probably take Flintstones vitamins, and God, I miss those. I used to enjoy them so much. They tasted so good. When I had to move up, finally grow up and get some One-A-Days, they just weren't the same. I don't know why One-A-Days can't have fruity flavors too, in the shape of my favorite Flintstone friends. Some side tracks when you knew that the Flintstones was running out of ideas was in the final season when Gazoo was introduced, the great Gazoo, the Martian with all these powers. It seemed like the Flintstones family storylines were not exactly taking off quite as much as they had hoped. So Gazoo came in so he could like zap them into different stories, and now they could do more fantasy stuff. But even though some people are endeared by the great Gazoo, a lot of people think Gazoo might have been the time when they jumped the shark on that show. I have a lot of favorite episodes, a lot of classic ones. One of my favorite all-time ones is, in fact, it is my favorite Flintstones. It's the one where Fred has to book two parties. He has to book the Lodge stag party, and then he has to book Pebble's first birthday. And he gets a clown and some dancing girls, and they mix up the venues. And the sequence with the dancing girls in the house at Pebble's birthday, where they just jump out of the cake, just one after another flying out of this cake, is single-handedly one of my all-time favorite TV moments, not only just things. There is so much risque innuendo without going anywhere near the top. Just Barney, dancing with them and Betty yelling at him, and he's just like, just helping him out the door, Betty. It's just a magical moment to show how a show that had, family, thing could still throw in a little thing. It is one of my favorite episodes to date. I collected some Flintstones memorabilia. One of my favorite ones that I got when I was a kid, and I sadly lost it as a kid, was they had these big plastic drinking straws, and they actually had like a full Pebbles and Bam Bam figurine on it, where you could hook their hands on your cup, and then you both had a straw, and so when you drank, it looked like Pebbles and Bam Bam drank. I love this, only because, you could take the straw out, and then you'd have like this Pebbles and Bam Bam action figure. And I was a big Bam Bam fan, so I really wanted the Bam Bam one. And my parents looked everywhere but couldn't find me Bam Bam, so I got Pebbles. And I still loved it. And then I guess, growing up, it was sold at a garage sale or given to somebody, but I lost my Pebbles. A couple of years ago, I went to Cool Stuff Toys in Hamilton, and if you've never been to Cool Stuff and you like looking at collectible toys, this is the place to go. And I went there, and I, for the first time, saw my Bam Bam there. And I was just like, oh my God, they have one. And it didn't have the straw, which is probably good because the straw, we're talking the late 60s, early 70s for this. So I think the straw would have been pretty grody. And they had both of them there, and they weren't very expensive. So I picked them up. And so now I have Pebbles and Bam Bam back into my collection, and I'm so proud of that. And I talked to the guy who collected Flintstone stuff, and he says to find one with the actual straw intact is almost hard because kids loved it so much. And I think that says a lot for fans of the Flintstones. Um, People just absolutely love them. I remember when we went into Starsky's, which is kind of like a European food store. I was surprised, like just a few years ago, how many pictures of the Flintstones were on products because the Flintstones are so renowned all over the world because a lot of these products are from Europe and stuff. And yet, you'd see pop bottles with, Pebbles and Bam Bam on them, or you'd see Fred and Barney, on, some snack or something. And I was amazed just how much Flintstones, were on packages to sell them. And it really shows me how much people are endeared to this show. In fact, if you say the Flintstones, you probably look around and you're guaranteed to get someone have a big smile on their face because of how these shows still work. And a lot of them still hold up today. Here in Hamilton, we actually have a restaurant called the Bedrock Bistro. Now, I don't know if they're actually licensed through it, but they actually have a lot of memorabilia on the walls and stuff, and they run episodes of the Flintstones while you eat. And it's kind of a nice experience, especially if you're a Flintstone fan. A lot of people don't think of the Flintstones as groundbreaking, but besides them being the first adult family show, they also dealt with some issues that I look back at, and as a kid probably flew right over my head. But as an adult, I look back and think that they tackled some subjects that were pretty surprising. One of them was after Pebbles is born, Betty and Barney are visiting a lot, and Fred yells at them because of the fact that he thinks that they shouldn't be over as much. And because they have Pebbles now and they don't have a kid of their own, they shouldn't be, using their kid. It was pretty adult at the time. I don't know any situation in real life where I've heard of a family saying, you shouldn't be here over the time, get your own kid. But anyhow, the importance of this story was there's a scene where Betty and Barney are on a stoop, and Betty's crying. And in the conversation, they make comments about not being able to have kids and be blessed. And I always tell people when they tell me, oh, Flintstones is fluffy, this is one of the first shows, I think, that dealt with infertility. We don't know if Betty couldn't have kids or if Barney was shooting blanks, but we do know that they could not have kids. And then, a star flew over their heads and they made a wish. And of course, since they desperately want a child, a few days later, a bundle is left on their door. And it is Bam Bam, obviously. And they get a little boy because they can't have one of their own. Now, having an adopted brother, I thought this was an amazing story because if you watch the show, Barney and Betty don't treat Bam Bam any differently than Fred and Wilma treat Pebbles because he's adopted. They love him just as much, and I love, in some ways, I never understood why they chose for Bam Bam to have superhuman strength. I'm really saddened because when they did the Teen Pebbles and Bam Bam show, I actually liked the show, but one of the big problems I had with it was that Bam Bam suddenly didn't have those powers. And it kind of made me feel bad that in puberty he kind of, did he lose those powers? Like, either way, it's a dark thing to look at. But anyhow, I love that they not only dealt with infertility, but they dealt with adoption and showed that these two could love a child that wasn't their own, and a child that had superhuman strength, which I don't know, and some people could have looked at that as a disability. And, we're going back to the 60s here. So it wasn't like they were going to have a character with disabilities on the show. So in some ways, I always think Bam Bam this was his disability. He had over-aggression or something, He'd take Fred's hand and crack it. And then just like smack him around the room, He had anger management issues, but these parents worked with him. Maybe I should look at it when they did the Teen Pebbles and Bam Bam, that his parents loved him so much, he worked out his anger management. Maybe that's a more positive way. The Flintstones had many incarnations. Some of the later ones didn't really translate with me. They did a couple of TV movies that actually got high ratings, like the one where Pebbles and Bam Bam get married. Apparently, it was one of the highest rated TV movies at the time. They did a couple of live action films. I know some people can't stand the live action one with John Goodman and Rick Moranis. I actually think they did a great job. I believe Bryant Levant was the name of the director, and you could tell he was a huge Flintstone fan, because I think he kept a lot of the, just looking at bringing Bedrock to life. I think he did a great job with it. I just think the story was a little above kids' heads, because I think they needed to play for a family audience, and having a storyline where Fred's moving up the corporate ladder, I just don't think translates. But overall, I think the first movie is pretty good. Viva Rock Vegas, not so much. It's a mess of a film. They got an all-new cast. I think my only favorite is seeing Baby Dino. I think he's pretty cute in it. Gazoo, played by Alan Cummings, is probably the weirdest thing you'll ever see, though I give them credit for trying to bring him to the big screen. I'm sure the Flintstones will take another crack at it at some time. My sadness is that Family Guy creator, he was supposed to be bringing a new version of the Flintstones to life, but unfortunately I think that's come to an end now. And although I love Family Guy, I was worried that maybe they'd do Flintstones a little too risque, but I was interested to see what they would do, and if they could modernize Flintstones. If you're a real Flintstones fan, there's actually a comic book out right now that actually is a serious look at the Flintstone. Kind of like what they did with Archie, where they gave, him more of a tone in the comics. There's actually a new Flintstones comic, and they look very weird because they're very human looking. And you get an actual chance to see what they would look like as real humans, and it's a kind of gritty looking magazine. But if you're interested in the Flintstones, you might want to hit your local comic book store and give it a look. Anyhow, you can pick up them all on DVD. I'm sure they stream on a lot of stations. They still make me laugh. My friends and I like to crank out an episode here and there, and we get a good smile. Sometimes we laugh for the wrong reasons, because the show just, has some inappropriate stuff that wasn't inappropriate at the time. But if you get a chance to check out some Flintstones, absolutely do it to relive your youth, or for you youngins out there, see what The Simpsons was like before The Simpsons was around, because that's what the Flintstones were. But just remember, they weren't as risque or edgy, but at the time, probably, definitely were considered that. Anyhow, I'm going to take a short break, and I'll be back with my final segment. I'm in the mood for Flintstones right now. And we're back with our final segment. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. A surefire way of finding out you're old is when you look at your calendar and you realize you have more doctor's appointments than you do special events with friends and family. And that's what this month is already feeling like, because this week alone I have 3 doctor's appointments, or not necessarily doctor's appointments, but things that are related to doctor's appointments. which I'll talk about a little bit more in depth. Not too personal, but just experiences I have. Um, Now, I remember going to the doctor as a kid, or at least I remember my mother going to the doctor as a kid. And this is going back to the days when you could literally call up that day and they would have spots for you. Now you call up and you're lucky if you can, okay, we'll see you, sometime 3 days from now on Thursday. Which my big joke is like, but I might not be sick then, and then they say, well, that's the best we can do. But back in the day, you could actually literally call in the morning and they would have spots still available. And I remember my mother, she could be terribly sick and have to go into the doctor. And I remember she would constantly make sure her hair looked good. She'd put makeup on. And I'd always say, Mom, why are you putting makeup on? You're sick. You don't have to look good going to the doctor. And she goes, no, no, no. I don't leave this house without looking good. So I don't care how sick I am. I'm not letting a doctor examine me if I don't look good. So I always thought that was quite funny. And sadly, I take that from her because whenever I go to a doctor, I make sure that, I'm all clean and looking, good, even though I may feel like absolute shit inside. I used to have a family doctor, one that we had as a kid. And what happened was she was a wonderful doctor. And one day my brother called me up. And like we had her from like, I'm going to say when we were kids, all the way up to like when we were in our 30s and stuff. And my brother called me one day and said, have you tried to make an appointment with our doctor? And I said, no, why? And he said, because she's retired. I called up, and when I looked up on the computer, it basically had her name and that she retired. And so we grew up with this doctor, and I was a little saddened that she couldn't recommend us to another place or even let us know that she was retiring and not going to be in the business. It wasn't until my brother needed her that suddenly she was unavailable, and I thought that was a little shitty, but none of my business. But anyhow, so I've never really had a doctor since then. I've been to walk-in clinics, and I've actually, to me, walk-in clinics are the doctors of the future, because walk-in clinics, I've tried to go into other doctors, but the problem with it is that a lot of them say, they make you jump through hoops. Like, okay, well, we do one interview a week, and you've got to be sitting at home at 10:30 in the morning, waiting for that call. And if you don't answer, then you're back on the waiting list. And I basically remember telling them, well, what if I'm at work on that day? I'm supposed to take time off work for this? And they said, well, if it's important enough for you. And I thought, that's bull crap. It's like basically bull crap. First, it's a lotto. They pick one person a week, and then they tell you, okay, you've got to be here for an interview. On your phone, it's not even like an appointment to come in. They're going to call you, and they don't even make sure that you don't even know if they're going to call you that week. Then I went to other places that said, okay, but once you get a doctor, you can't go to the walk-in clinics anymore. We don't want that because we get charged for it. And then I'm like, but what if I'm really sick and I have to go to a walk-in clinic? No, you wait. And if you call in, you have to wait the 2-3 days to get an appointment. So I thought to myself, I'm starting to have like little faith in doctors. So I started just saying, okay, I'm going to just go to the walk-in clinic. And now a lot of you are probably shaking your head and stuff. Where I am right now, I'm actually in a good place because I get to see a regular doctor. They're only there one day a week, but I always arrange to make sure I go see them on that day. Unless I was really sick, then I'd go see anyone. But they've actually asked me to like fill out forms, so I actually have a record there. So now any doctor can see what I've been in there for and stuff like that. So I'm luckily enough to found that arrangement because I know a lot of people still look for family doctors and stuff like that. And I personally, I think a lot of them are a scam. I don't want to be one of those naysayers, but I don't think you get as good doctor care as you once did. Yes, it's all free and stuff, but I think as the years go on, they really take their liberties of the whole, well, you don't pay, so, you should be happy you're just going to go there anyhow. And it's not like it's not like a waiting room. Like if you're really sick, they take you in immediately. But if you're waiting, I remember seeing this meme on Facebook of this thing that was posted that said, okay, you're in an emergency room, you're waiting. Well, don't complain. The fact that you're waiting means you're probably not going to die. We've taken in the people that we think are going to have a better, a chance that they could die, so we take them first. So you shouldn't be complaining. When you call for a doctor's appointment, a lot of them don't even ask what you need it for. So it's not like, oh, well, I cut my hand off. They don't know, well, it's just a cold. Oh, I got some weird pains that I'm really concerned about. So it's not like they're judging, like, oh, cutting your hand off, that seems pretty important. You should come in immediately. Or, no, it's not even that. They don't care. It's just like, this is the first available date we have. And we won't even get into specialists, like when, they tell you, you've got a serious condition. We'll see you 8 months from now. And, their whole thing is, well, it's not that serious if we're going to see you in 8 months. But it's like, how serious can it get in the 8 months that I haven't seen a specialist? Okay, I told you not to get into it. So anyhow, I went to my first appointment, which was blood work. These are my favorite appointments because of the fact that I have an amazing place I go to that's really quick. I go early in the day. I like to get it out of the way. And they get the results to the doctor immediately, like within a couple of days. So it works out perfect. Wednesdays is the day I get to see my doctor. So if I go on a Saturday morning, they always have the blood work done. And blood work is kind of easy for me. I don't like needles, but I'm not horrible with them. I usually can't look at them going in. I don't mind feeling them. I don't like seeing being injected into me. Actually, this past one, she was talking to me, didn't even realize that she was getting ready to put the needle in, and she did. And I was actually looking at the blood coming out, and I turned my head quickly and realized, wow, I saw it. It didn't freak me out as much as I did, and I like it because they're usually like, they're really good at what they do, and so even if there's a long lineup, they're getting people 2 at a time done, and you're going to still be out of there maybe in 15, 20 minutes, and I love that. I love that. And if I get there early enough, I'm usually one of the first. But even if there is a long lineup, I'm done really quick. And then sometimes they ask for a urinal, like a urine sample. And that's always kind of interesting because I'm always like, oh, good, I have to go. I have to go, which means I'm going to hold it until, they ask me. And then sometimes you're just like, well, what if I can't go when they ask you? I'm not like a trained seal. They snap their fingers and I'll in a minute have to urinate. I'm just not that way. And so, and then it's always weird. I always feel weird when you come out of the bathroom with the hot cup. And come on, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to gross anybody out, but you got the hot cup. And you're looking for a place to take it, and then a nurse will say, put it in that basket, or she'll take it from you. And to me, it's just weird when I hand a cup of my pee. I know that's what they do, but it's weird I'm saying goodbye to a bottle of my urine that's sitting there with a whole bunch of other bottles of urine. Anyhow, but the blood work, I'm fine with that. It's simple, it's easy. Then I had an eye doctor's test, and I don't mind the eye doctor's test. I have a really nice eye doctor that I've been going to for years. I keep worrying that he might retire on me soon, too, and I really like him. But I've been going back regularly now to the eye doctor. It used to be like every 6 months, but the last couple months, they've been really concerned with glaucoma. with my diabetes. They don't know if I have it or not. They don't think I do, but I'm on that cusp. So now they've given me some handy dandy eye drops. And the only thing I don't like about the eye doctor, and I'm shocked because one of the things they do is they do this thing where they put something as close to my eye as possible. Now, I always thought this would be the thing that freaked me out most, but it's not. I'm actually pretty good with that, like keeping my eyes wide and then putting something. It doesn't feel anything on my eyes. The two things that irritate me the most is, number one, I do something called a Fields test, where they basically, it's an old-fashioned thing, because I think I've been doing it since I was a little kid there, and they put your chin on a thing, and you put your head in this giant white globe, and then they tell you to look at the lights and stare at the one light, and whenever you see a light inside the globe, to press the button. So you're playing like a medieval, old-style video game that's not much fun, and then you do it for both eyes. They put an eye patch on you, so it's like a pirating game. And then they ask you to, like, just hit the lights whenever. So that, it bothers me because I get caught looking around sometimes. You can tell on the chart, like, okay, you were looking around. I could tell your eye wasn't always on it. And I go, I swear I try hard. So now I'm always worried that I'm going to get reprimanded from him because he can always tell when my eyes are moving. So I'm always like transfixed on that dot. And, sometimes he says, okay, you did really good and stuff. And I'm like, sometimes I want to nod off during it too. And then the other thing I hate at the eye doctor is when you do the test where they put the big metal glasses thing on you and they tell you, okay, what line can you read? And then you read one, and you always try to read the one you can't really see, but you can see a couple of the letters. But you know that, I don't want to be just reading the top one again. I want to try to read another one. So you find yourself trying desperately to, like, I think it's a Q, I think it's an O, and so... and then they do the flip thing where they flip the one eye and then they flip the other eye. Then they flip the one eye and the other eye and tell me which looks better. And honestly, I can't tell because they look just as bad or just as good. So I'm like, I think the second one. And I even like sometimes, could you show me that again? And he'll flip. And I'm like, there's no difference. And so I try to tell him, like, I can't tell a difference in either of these. And that just irritates me. It's not a hard thing, but it just bothers me. So, so that's my eye doctor test. And then I went to the walk-in clinic for my checking on the blood work. And I like my doctor there. She's wonderful. I grew up with a female doctor, so I was never one of those ones that, I have to have a male doctor. I grew up with having a female doctor, and so I'm fine with her. I like that she doesn't yell at me about when she does, talk to me. She talks to me like a person. I hear some doctors are like, okay, you're doing this, you're giving up smoking, you're losing weight, you're doing this. She just tells me things, and some people say, well, that means she doesn't care. Well, that's good. I don't want her to care that much because it should be my decision to care. But she's really good. She was the first one who diagnosed me with diabetes and put me on medicine for my high blood pressure that helped immediately. The day I got my high blood pressure, I think they were worried because they took my temperature and basically the woman said, this can't be the right number. And the nurse said, I did it twice and that is the number. And the woman said, the doctor said, but if he had that temperature, he would be shaking and shivering and he would almost not be alive. And she said, yeah, I know, but that's what it reads. So they gave me this high blood pressure, and then I came back like within a day, and my pressure had gone nice. And I have to say, since I've been on this drug, my blood pressure has never escalated again. So I love this drug they put me on, and I'm not a big fan of taking drugs by any means. Still waiting for the results of this one. As I said, she's really good with me. My blood pressure's always been good. I had some cholesterol issues. You get three cholesterol numbers, and even when I started watching what I ate and stuff, two of the numbers were nice, but the third one was erratic. And she told me this may not even have anything to do with what you're eating or drinking. This could be hereditary. So she put me on a cholesterol pill that actually has been working wonders. And so the last couple times they're keeping an eye on my diabetes because my numbers are pretty good, but I guess I'm always close to being over. And she's like very interested in seeing if I ever pop over that thing. And I know losing weight, I know all that stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, so we're now waiting for confirmation if they're going to change the drugs that I'm on. Um, I hope we don't. I kind of don't want to go to the needle. I don't want to go to that. Don't know if I'm ready to do that. But anyhow, so going to the doctor's not always a fun thing to do. I've lucked out with my appointments. Certainly the sign of growing old. As I said, I've lost confidence in doctors in a lot of ways. Um, I think doctors do wonderful jobs. I think nurses do wonderful jobs. Don't get me wrong. But for me, I just think, the high waiting lists, the for specialist appointment, just some of the overall, I know a lot of it is, they're overworked. I think a lot of doctors take on too many patients, and I think that's what happens. I think because of the baby boomers, there's a lot of older patients that come in for every little thing. And I think some of them are lonely, to go back to my first topic. And I think they go in just to talk. So whenever they get a little, oh, I get a little pain in my wrist, I better go in. And I think that things. But I've kind of lost my faith in doctors. And I'm not sold that they really care about me. I think they just kind of look to see what prescriptions they can give me. So sometimes when I'm bad and I don't follow my doctor's instructions, I feel it's my life and I get to decide that. So whenever they give me things to do, I really consider if this is something that I'll do. And in most cases, I do follow. I'm a little bit old school. Okay, these are doctors. They know better than me. But as I get older, I get a little skeptical, like, wow, they're giving me more drugs, and it just seems like it's their answer for everything now. It's almost like I could go into a pharmacist and give my symptoms, and they could probably prescribe me something just as much. And a lot of times I think it's a guinea pig effect. I've had many times where I've been misdiagnosed and been given drugs that have actually been more harmful. And I've heard many stories about this. And it's like, okay, well, come in. You paid for the drugs already. Who cares? Just throw them out or, bring them to the pharmacy to get rid of them. And we'll give you new drugs to try. And it's like, well, I paid for those drugs. And now I have to pay for these drugs. You know, I have insurance, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't. And, it saddens me that they can't do the medicine. We've got this awesome health care, but a lot of the cases, a lot of them have to take sample drugs or not take drugs at all. And so, I don't know, I seem to lose my faith in doctors a lot, but I still go whenever I have to the things. But as I get older, I see myself getting more skeptical. And it scares me because I'm starting to do old man traits that I never thought I'd do, and here I am doing them. So, but right now I'm trying to do what I can, hoping that I'm staying as healthy as possible. I know I could always be healthier, and I know a lot of that is on me, but I choose right now not to worry about that. And that's my choice. And obviously, I wouldn't be going to any of these doctors if I didn't care about my health. So, for those of you who are thinking, oh God, he's doing stupid things, just keep in mind, I would have canceled all these appointments if I really didn't care about myself. So, let's just worry about that. And if you have to go to the doctors this week, sending positive messages to you, whether you have to sit in long lineups or waiting rooms. Take me along with you. Bad time for a commercial, but you can always download a podcast and listen to it in your Walkman, and then I'll be there sitting in that waiting room with you. Anyhow, I had a great time tonight. I hope you did too. I will be back again next week, and I will talk to you very, very soon.